welcome to the latest episode of the B Movie Club. I'm your host, Kevin. This week we'll be discussing the 1974 classic Death Wish, starring Charles Bronson. For those of you joining us for the first time, the B Movie Club, it's like a book club where each week we'll discuss certain movies. I'll post it on Facebook. You can send me your questions, comments, favorite scenes, favorite quotes, anything else you want to say, and we'll talk about it on the show. Some people have suggested certain movies, and if they're available streaming instantly on Netflix, I definitely put them in the rotation. If I can't do it that week, I try to do it the next week. Occasionally, movies are not streaming instantly on Netflix. So what do? I add it to my queue so that if they ever do come up available, then, like I said, they go back in the rotation so that I can do them. So keep those movie suggestions coming. Feel free to go onto Facebook, our page, the original B Movie Club, and click the like button. You'll get all of our latest updates. Also, don't forget to subscribe on our page on YouTube, KD9575. Again, you'll receive email notifications whenever I've uploaded a new video. And if you want to reach me immediately, like yesterday, use Twitter at KD9575. Death Wish. Paul Kersey, played by Charles Bronson, is like a liberal New Yorker architect type whose family is attacked by a vicious gang of street thugs. And, spoiler alert, his wife is killed and his daughter is sexually assaulted to the point where she goes into basically a coma. Like, she's just in a state of shock. Like, she can't respond to outward stimuli. So there you go. So he goes out and gets a gun and goes out in the world and basically tries to combat crime by setting himself up as basically a mugging victim. Like, walk around in really horrible neighborhoods wearing his nice clothes, I guess, and try to entice muggers to try to handle, try to mug him. At that point, he pulls out his 6-shooter and takes care of him. So, over the course of time, after he's gunned down a few muggers, now the police are on the case. They're concerned about it. They're concerned for a number of reasons. A, people are getting murdered, obviously. But also because they don't want people to emulate this vigilante situation, as you might imagine. They don't want other people starting to do it. And actually, people are starting to do it. They show, actually, clips, I guess, dramatizations of construction workers chasing down a purse snatcher and kicking him, and an old woman holding off 2 muggers with a hat pin. So the whole city is getting behind him, essentially. He's kind of a folk hero. And because of that, crime is dropping. I don't know if all the muggers suddenly decide, you know what, I'm just going to go back to that job at the firm. This mugging stuff's just way too dangerous. But for whatever reason, crime goes down. Now the cops are in a quandary. What do? Do we arrest this guy and make him a martyr? And then we don't want the crime to rebound now that we've captured the vigilante. So it's kind of an interesting moral quandary that they have to deal with. So I don't want to spoil everything. I don't want to give it all away. But if you haven't seen it, you got to check it out. Things I can tell you about this movie. Charles Bronson was 52 when he made this movie. He'd been in a ton of stuff. He'd been in, like, The Dirty Dozen, The Magnificent Seven, a lot of movies with numbers in the title. But this is the first movie that really kind of put him on the map as like kind of a tough guy, crime fighter, action hero type. Later after doing this, he went on to do obviously like 5 sequels of the Death Wish movies. I mean, spanning through the 90s. He went on to do Mr. Majestic, The Evil That Men Do, 10 to Midnight, all these kind of, he's this tough guy, fighting crime in his own way kind of deal. Originally, this was based upon a book called Death Wish, which actually talked about, the central theme of it was the dangers of vigilantism and why it's not a good thing. Whereas the author felt that the movie went on to kind of glorify it. This is a few years after Dirty Harry came out, so it's a lot of, in the 70s, people were like, why do we gotta read them their rights? Why can't we just shoot them? Kind of thing that was sweeping the nation. So, what can I tell you? Originally they wanted to call this movie The Sidewalk Vigilante, because even though the title of the book was Death Wish, there really hadn't been a lot of movies with the word death in the title. They thought that would be kind of a turnoff for fans or audience members. In fact, by the time the final sequel was made in the early 90s, it was called like Death Wish 5, The Face of Death. So there you go. So they just doubled down on the death at that point. Some other people that were approached for this role, Steve McQueen turned it down. They went to Frank Sinatra. He turned it down. When they finally went to Charles Bronson, and they talked to him about the script, and he said, you know, basically what your character does is he shoots muggers. He's like, shooting muggers? I'd like to do that. I mean, you'd like to be the character in this movie? No, I'd like to shoot muggers. I don't know if that's true, but that's what he said. Which is kind of ironic, because I read somewhere that Charles Bronson was actually a pacifist in real life. So there you go. Originally, they wanted his wife, Jill Ireland, to play his wife in the movie. And he wasn't too keen on having his wife attacked and killed by a bunch of street thugs. So there you go. There are a lot of little cameos, although at the time they weren't cameos. They were just young actors who went on to do bigger and better things that you'd recognize now if you saw it. Like, for example, one of the violent street toughs that breaks their way into the house to attack his family was Jeff Goldblum, of all people. Which would be disturbing in and of itself. Just seeing him walking down the street, you'd be like, oh my goodness. Basically, the street toughs see the wife and the daughter at the grocery store and follow them and attack them and do their thing. What's interesting about this movie is that no time do you see the Charles Bronson character try to track down the actual guys who do the crime. Like, he just goes out and starts killing other muggers. If this movie were made today, I mean, you'd have to think there'd be at least one scene where we see Jeff Goldblum at the local hangout of the toughs, and that Charles Bronson kicks in the door and does some damage. But little side note on Jeff Goldblum: has there been ever an actor that has delivered lines in a more peculiar fashion? Watch any of his movies, and you'll be like, why did you put the emphasis on that word? Why is it just kind of trailing off at the end? What are you trying to say? The only one I can think of that comes close is Al Pacino. I've got 2 dead bodies on the street on Venice Boulevard, Justine. I'm sorry, the chicken is overcooked. That's Al Pacino from Heat. Go watch that movie. You'll see some crazy lines. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What else can I tell you about this movie? It's interesting. As far as action films go, I mean, he only kills 11 people over the course of this movie. I mean, that's like a drop in the well, right? I mean, but it's, again, going back, he was 52. He was basically over the hill as far as these movies go. I mean, they didn't want to cast some big, imposing figure. They wanted him to be able to be some kind of an everyman. Now, knowing Charles Bronson like we do, if we see him in a movie, we know he's going to be gunning people down in the street, pretty much. But at the time, that's not what was expected of him. So that's kind of interesting. I mentioned Jeff Goldblum played one of the crazy street toughs. Christopher Guest is in this. He's actually the cop who retrieves the gun used in the crimes, and he has talks to the police about it and everything. Christopher Guest. Denzel Washington is in this movie. You have to look closely though. He's uncredited. He's in there somewhere. So, another thing that I found kind of interesting is the character's name, Paul Kersey, was not the name of the character from the book. They actually took that name from just some extra on the set at the last minute. They're like, okay, that sounds good. We'll just use that name. Like I said, they made like 5 sequels to this movie, and they all basically start the same. He's in a new town trying to get his life together, and somebody's attacked by vicious street toughs, and he has to dust off his 6-shooter and go back on the street. I don't know how many... I mean, eventually people would stop hanging out with him, wouldn't they? You know, hey, I noticed that everybody you know is dead. I think I'm going to have to take a pass on going to get drinks with you later. Maybe that's just me. So like I said, it is streaming instantly on Netflix, so check it out. If you haven't seen it in a while, I know most of you haven't. I know I hadn't seen it until recently. Check it out. I highly recommend it. It has a 68% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It's good. It's entertaining. It's more of a crime story than a straight up action film. He's not jumping out of windows or diving over the hood of cars or barrel rolling down the street or anything like that. It's like suspense. They're kind of building the suspense. So again, I highly recommend it. Next week, I'm going back to comedy. For the classic comedy Saving Silverman, starring Jason Biggs, Steve Zahn, Jack Black, R. Lee Ermey. Neil Diamond is in it. It is streaming instantly on Netflix, so be sure to check it out. Send me your favorite scenes, quotes, questions, comments, and we'll talk about it on the show. Don't forget to tell a friend to subscribe, please. As you know, I end every episode with a totally out of context quote, and here it is. I think I hear that mugging is down in the city. There's only one way to find out. Go take a walk down Columbus Street late at night. I think I'll wait for the official police report if it's all the same to you. There you go. Not the best line in the world, but there weren't a lot of one-liners in this one. I'm sorry. If Clint Eastwood was in it, it'd be nothing but make my day. But it's Charles Bronson. He's a strong, silent type. Thank you for joining us next week, Saving Silverman. Tell a friend.